Hello everyone. The story I'm about to tell you today takes place in Wisconsin, the 30th state of the United States, widely known for its cheese production. In Wisconsin, there's a city called Milwaukee, the largest city in the state and its economic hub. Milwaukee was once voted one of the best cities in the Midwest, but from the late 1980s to the early 1990s, more than a dozen people went missing there. All of them were gay men. The police suspected a serial killer was at work in the area, but with no solid leads, they couldn't catch the culprit. That is until one day, when two patrol officers stumbled upon a series of crimes that would shock the entire nation. Let's rewind to July 22, 1991. On July 22, 1991, a Monday night, around 11:30 p.m., two police officers were on routine patrol through the streets of Milwaukee. As they approached an apartment building on North 25th Street, a black man suddenly bolted out of the building. He was shirtless, wearing a single handcuff, and looked terrified. He ran straight toward the officers, shouting, "Someone's trying to kill me." At first, the officers thought he might be some kind of pervert and moved to restrain him, but he quickly explained, "My name's Tracy Edwards. Tonight, I went to a bar with two friends to have some drinks. While I was there, I met a white, gay guy. He was generous, offered $100 to invite a few of us back to his apartment to drink and take some sexy photos. Out of the three of us, I was the only one who said yes. I followed him to his place in this building. When I walked in, I noticed an awful stench. There were a few bottles of hydrochloric acid on the living room floor, and the TV was playing The Exorcist III. It felt off, so I asked him about the acid. He said it was for cleaning the floors. After chatting for a bit, he suddenly handcuffed me. I figured some people have weird kinks, so I didn't freak out, just asked why he did it. He said it was a personal preference and hoped I'd play along. We went into the bedroom, but the smell there was even worse. In the corner, there was a big blue plastic barrel. I figured that's where the stink was coming from. Even though it was nasty, I went along and lay on the bed for the photos. Then, out of nowhere, he pulled a knife, held it to me, and told me to strip. I got a bad feeling, but with my hands cuffed, escaping wasn't easy. While taking off my clothes, I suggested he uncuff me, acting cooperative. He let his guard down, set the knife aside, and started pacing around the room, humming a song. When I was done undressing, he came close, leaned over my chest, and whispered, "I'm gonna eat your heart." I was horrified. I'd guessed he was into some freaky stuff, but not this freaky. I forced a smile, teased him a little, and said, "We're friends, right? Trying to buy time while figuring out how to get out." Then I noticed the apartment door wasn't locked. That was my shot. I suggested we go to the living room for a few drinks. Later, I slipped into the bathroom, waiting for him to drop his guard. When I came out and he wasn't paying attention, I clocked him hard in the face, bolted out the door, and ran as fast as I could. Lucky for me, I spotted you two right here. After hearing Tracy's story, the officers followed him into the building and up to apartment 213 on the second floor. They knocked, and a white man answered the door. When questioned, he admitted to handcuffing Tracy Edwards, but said the key was on the nightstand by the bed. Since Tracy had mentioned being threatened with a knife, the officers cautiously entered to check things out. In the bedroom, they noticed a drawer by the bed slightly ajar. Peeking inside, they saw photos of dismembered bodies. Convinced the pictures were real, they drew their guns, subdued the man, and called for backup. As they searched further, they opened the fridge in the living room and found a freshly severed head of a black man, along with other body parts. When the man realized he'd been caught, he yelled, "I did all of this, I deserve to die." Backup arrived quickly, sealing off the apartment as the official investigation began. In the kitchen, they found cooked human flesh. Besides the head, the fridge held two hearts and part of an arm. Other body parts were wrapped in plastic bags. In total, they discovered 11 skulls. 4 in the living room, 7 in the bedroom, some bleached, some painted. A blue plastic barrel in the bedroom contained acidic liquid and body parts from 3 different men. They also found 2 complete skeletons, a pair of severed hands, 2 male genitals, and more. Plus, there were 74 Polaroid photos documenting the dismemberment of various victims. The scene was so gruesome that a forensic worker later said, "It felt more like a surgical museum than a crime scene." The suspect's identity was soon revealed. Jeffrey Lionel Dahmer, born May 21, 1960 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. His father, Lionel Herbert Dahmer, was a PhD chemist. His mother, Joyce Annette, was a homemaker. After Jeffrey was born, his mom suffered from postpartum depression, spending days in bed. His dad, busy finishing his degree, wasn't around much either. As a kid, Jeffrey was quiet and well-behaved, but as he grew up, his mum's condition worsened. She even tried to take her own life, and his parents' constant yelling matches unfolded right in front of him. In 1964, at age 4, Jeffrey had surgery for a double hernia. After that, he turned inward, avoiding people. One day, he watched his dad experiment with animal bones at home and got hooked. He started scavenging for bones in the woods, even catching live animals to feel their bones by pressing down hard, thrilled when he heard them crack. In October 1966, at 6, the family moved to Doylestown, Ohio. His mom gave birth to a little brother named David, a name Jeffrey picked. That same year, his dad got a job at a research institute in Ohio. Over the next 2 years, they moved several times before settling in Bath Township, Summit County, Ohio, in a 2-story house in a quiet neighborhood. At 8, Jeffrey would wander around and found an abandoned wooden shack in the woods. He turned it into his secret base, where he collected bugs and small animals, storing them in jars. In 1970, at 10, during a family gathering, Jeffrey curiously asked his dad what would happen if chicken bones were bleached with chemicals. His dad, happy with the question, showed him how to safely bleach and preserve bones. From then on, Jeffrey collected roadkill or forest animals, bringing them to his shack to dissect, remove the organs, and keep the bones. Once, he killed a dog himself, cut off its head, skewered it with a stick, and staked it in the ground, nailing the rest to a tree. He admired his masterpiece and excitedly showed it to friends, claiming he'd stumbled across it. That year, his mom's depression deepened. She tried overdosing multiple times but failed. His dad was rarely home, swamped with work. Jeffrey hardly felt love from his parents growing up, though he seemed used to it by then. In 1974, at 14, Jeffrey started high school. Entering his rebellious teens without parental attention, he grew depressed and negative, feeling like no one understood him. He turned to alcohol for comfort, sneaking it into school in his clothes. Shy and bad at socializing, Jeffrey had few friends but craved attention. Since childhood, he'd faked seizures or bleated like a sheep to get noticed. These antics made him the class clown, but he didn't care. He just wanted eyes on him. Academically, he only liked biology, obsessed with dissecting animals, and ignored everything else. As a teen, Jeffrey wasn't into girls. He was drawn to guys. He had a few short-lived boyfriends, but they didn't last. He fantasized about a boyfriend who'd obey him completely and never leave. One day, he saw a muscular man jogging and got excited. A few days later, he hid in some bushes with a baseball bat, planning to attack the guy, but the man didn't show. This was his first brush with crime. In 1977, Jeffrey was set to graduate high school, but his grades were terrible. Worried, his parents hired a tutor to help him at home. By then, their fights had escalated, sometimes turning physical. In 1978, their marriage fell apart. Jeffrey, now 18, invited his mom to his graduation, but she declined, saying, "Your dad's enough." Though his parents barely paid him any mind, they fought over custody of David. His mom won, taking David back to Wisconsin, while Jeffrey stayed with his dad. This string of unhappy events hit Jeffrey hard. He felt his parents only cared about his brother, leaving him unloved. He sank deeper into alcoholism, drunk all day. In June 1978, 3 weeks after graduating, Jeffrey was driving when he spotted a shirtless guy walking. Intrigued, he pulled over and asked, "Need a ride?" The guy, Stephen Hicks, happily hopped in. They chatted, and Jeffrey learned Stephen was headed to a concert in Lockwood Corners. He suggested, "It's still early, want to grab a drink at my place first? I'll drive you to the concert after." Stephen agreed. At Jeffrey's house they drank and talked. Stephen went on about pretty women, but Jeffrey wasn't interested. He only had eyes for Stephen. Knowing a romantic advance would get shot down, he felt let down. After a couple of hours, Stephen said it was time to head to the concert, but Jeffrey didn't want him to go. When Stephen wasn't looking, Jeffrey grabbed a 10-pound dumbbell and smashed it into Stephen's head twice, knocking him out. Then, he crushed Stephen's throat with it. After, he stripped the body and indulged himself. The next day, he dissected the corpse in the basement and buried it in the backyard. Weeks later, worried about kids playing nearby, he dug it up, dissolved the flesh in acid, smashed the bones to dust, and scattered them in the woods near the house. In July 1978, his dad came home and found Jeffrey boozing all day. Using some connections, he got Jeffrey enrolled at Ohio State University, a top public school in the Great Lakes region. But there, Jeffrey had zero interest in studying and kept drinking. His dad visited once and saw the dorm littered with empty bottles, totally disappointed. Jeffrey dropped out after just 3 months. In January 1979, at 19, Jeffrey joined the U.S. Army as a medic at his dad's urging, but his drinking and other issues got him discharged early. Not wanting to face his dad's wrath, on March 24, 1981, Jeffrey headed to Miami, Florida. He stayed in a motel and worked at a beachside fast food joint. Outside work, he just drank in his room. 6 months later, in September 1981, his dad found out he'd left the army and hadn't come home. He called and ordered Jeffrey back to Ohio. Back home, Jeffrey lived with his dad and stepmom. 2 weeks later, he landed in jail for 10 days for public intoxication and disorderly conduct. His dad made him do chores and find a job to stay busy and quit drinking, but it didn't work. In December 1981, his dad figured Jeffrey listened to his grandma, Jeffrey Dahmer, who'd been close to him since he was little. He sent Jeffrey to live with her in Milwaukee, asking her to push him to get a steady job and sober up. In 1982, Jeffrey got a job drawing blood at a local plasma center. But on August 10, 1982, he was arrested for exposing himself to kids and women, fined $50 and fired. For the next 2 years, he lived off his grandma's charity. In January 1985, at 25, he took a job mixing chocolate at a factory. One day, at the public library, a guy slipped him a note asking if he wanted a gay hookup. Jeffrey didn't respond, but it reignited a buried craving. From then on, he hit up gay bars and bathhouses regularly. He once stole a male mannequin from a store and hid it in his closet, but his grandma found it and made him toss it. He'd bring guys home to spend the night. Annoyed when they moved during sex, he started slipping sleeping pills or sedatives into their drinks, waiting until they passed out to have his way. His twisted thoughts kept getting darker. Once, he read about an 18-year-old guy's death in the paper, tracked down the grave, and went there at night with a shovel to dig up the body for kicks. But the ground was too hard, so he gave up. On September 10, 1986, Jeffrey got busted again for public exposure and was put on a year's probation. In November 1987, at 27, he met Stephen Tuomi, his second victim, at a bar. He lured Tuomi to a hotel, spiked his drink with sedatives, and had sex with him while he was out cold. The next morning, Jeffrey woke up to find Tuomi dead, chest bruised, blood leaking from his mouth. He hadn't meant to kill him, but it was too late. He bought a big suitcase, stuffed the body inside, and took it to his grandma's house. A week later, he dismembered it in the basement, chopping it up, smashing the bones to bits and tossing everything but the head in the trash. 2 weeks after that, he boiled the head in an alkaline solution with bleach, but it got too brittle and broke easily, so he crushed and ditched it. On January 16, 1988, Jeffrey met James Dockstader, his third victim, at a bar. He offered $50 to come home for photos, drugged him and strangled him. He disposed of the body the same way, keeping the head, bleaching it into a skull for display. Still unsatisfied, he kept using this trick to kill more gay guys he met at bars, preserving their skulls, most bleached, some painted with bright designs. In April 1988, Jeffrey lured another guy home. As he was about to strike, his grandma called out, "Is that you, Jeffrey?" Worried she'd catch him, he scrapped the plan and dumped the guy outside a hospital at midnight. His constant drinking and late-night guests made his room reek, and his grandma couldn't take it anymore. She kicked him out. He rented an apartment on North 24th Street in Milwaukee. 2 days after moving in on September 1988, Jeffrey was charged with drugging and molesting a 13-year-old boy. A psychologist diagnosed him with schizoid personality disorder, impulsive, distrustful, and insecure. In January 1989, his trial began. He was convicted of second-degree sexual assault, but sentencing was delayed until May 1989. While awaiting sentencing, he was jailed temporarily. In March 1989, he got a 10-day release for Easter. Just 5 days later, on March 25, 1989, he killed Anthony Sears, his fifth victim, a 24-year-old mixed-race model. He dragged the body to the bathtub at his grandma's, chopped it up, and stored some parts in jars inside a wooden box. On May 23, 1989, Jeffrey was sentenced to 5 years probation, including 1 year in jail. But after 2 months, he was released early for good behavior and went back to his grandma's. On May 14, 1990, she kicked him out again over his creepy collection. He moved to apartment 213 on North 25th Street, the place from the start of this video. Over the next 2 years there, with no one watching him, Jeffrey killed 12 more people. He'd lure them with cash for risque photos, satisfy his urges, then dispose of the bodies, keeping skulls as trophies, even trying to dry one in a microwave once, only for it to explode. He grew bored with strangling and started drilling holes in victims' heads, injecting acid or pouring boiling water to turn them into zombies, barely conscious but unable to fight back. On May 26, 1991, he invited Konarak Synthesomphone, a 14-year-old Laotian immigrant and his 13th victim, over to take pictures. He spiked Konarak's drink, drilled his skull, and injected acid. After, he left the boy in the bedroom next to another victim's 3-day-old corpse and went to a bar. Early the next morning, he returned to find Konarak naked, talking to 3 women downstairs. Jeffrey threw an arm around him, saying, "He's my boyfriend. I'll take him now." The women didn't buy it and called the cops. 2 officers showed up. Jeffrey calmly said, "Konarak's my 19-year-old boyfriend. We had some drinks and he got wasted and ran off." The women pointed out blood on Konarak, but the cops brushed them off, telling them to mind their own business. Medics arrived and suggested taking Konarak to a hospital, but the cops refused. 3 officers then took the unconscious Konarak back to apartment 213. They noticed a weird smell and gave the place a quick look, but found nothing suspicious. Jeffrey showed them intimate photos he'd taken with Konarak that afternoon, convincing them his story checked out. They left. Furious that Konarak nearly escaped, Jeffrey injected more acid, killing him, and kept his heart and liver in the fridge to eat later. Over 2 years in that apartment, neighbors often complained about the stench and buzz of a power saw. Jeffrey always had excuses. By the time he was caught, he'd killed 17 people, aged 14 to 36, mostly black, Asian, or Hispanic immigrants. Back then, racism was rampant in the US, and Milwaukee, an industrial city, had tons of foreign workers. Maybe that's why his victims didn't get much attention. The 3 cops who returned Conorak to him might have been biased too, trusting Jeffrey, a white guy, over the women's concerns. Jeffrey faced 17 first-degree murder charges, but only admitted to 16. After his arrest, racial tensions flared and locals despised him. On January 13, 1992, his trial kicked off. To prevent riots, dozens of security guards with riot shields blocked the crowd. Shockingly, Jeffrey recanted his confession in court, claiming he'd been mentally unstable during police questioning and couldn't control himself. His lawyer argued he had a mental disorder and wasn't responsible for his actions. But the prosecutor insisted Jeffrey was fully sane, in control and killed to satisfy his urges, keeping bodies to dominate them, crimes that terrified Milwaukee. The trial dragged on for 4 months. On February 15, 1992, the jury unanimously sentenced Jeffrey Dahmer to 15 life terms, 941 years in prison. The charge for Stephen Tuomi, his second victim, was dropped since Jeffrey claimed he couldn't recall killing him. After sentencing, he was sent to Columbia Correctional Institution, a maximum security prison in Wisconsin, housing over 800 male inmates. At first he was in solitary, but later he joined the general population and worked prison jobs. He asked a guard for a Bible, read it daily, and confessed his sins to himself. In an interview, when asked why there was a 9-year gap between his first kill in 1978 and his second, he said, "I was always driven by the animal inside me, and I didn't know how to stop it." Asked why he kept skulls, he replied, "I was building an altar, a table with candles at each end and 10 skulls in the middle. I'd planned it 6 months before getting caught. It was for me, a place to meditate and draw power." On November 28, 1994, Jeffrey and 2 other inmates were cleaning a bathroom. After 20 minutes with no sound, a guard checked and found Jeffrey and another guy down, heads bashed in. They were rushed to the hospital, but Jeffrey died an hour later despite resuscitation efforts. The other inmate died 2 days after. The attacker, Christopher Scarver, a schizophrenic, said, "God told me to do it. I was serving his justice." He'd hidden a metal bar in his clothes and struck when they weren't looking. Jeffrey didn't even fight back. Jeffrey Dahmer, a monstrous killer whose crimes horrified the world, once said in an interview, "I don't know if God or the devil's real, but I think both were pulling at me." That's it for today's video. See you in the next one. Goodbye.